so I don't have to be going like this and like this all the time? Because we're not many and we've got lots of room here in the middle. I love to be able to look at people when I'm speaking. And, a lot of people will ask, what is the heart of Gen X, my generation? You just heard it. That's it. That's the heart of Gen X right there. It's the worship, the exaltation, and the longing, the absolute unfulfillable longing to see him exalted as king. Seeing him to be the king that we know he is and that he's meant to be, and for the world to see that way. That is a burning desire inside my generation. There's a song one of the worship leaders wrote named David Crowder, and in that song, he has a bridge in the song. It's, I don't remember what the name of the song is. I can remember the bridge, but not the song, but he says, "Majesty finally here." And I thought, that's it. He's a Gen Xer. I thought, that's it. There's the cry right there. Majesty finally here. That's what we're longing. Here's our King. That's what the song's called. And so thank you, Tabitha. Tabitha is my friend from Montreal who was leading the worship. And she agreed to come and be part of this with me because I don't think you can really separate Gen X and worship. They're like this. They're so intertwined. And I know we've got a real mixed room here. So first of all, I just want to ask people who's all familiar with the terms builder, boomer, Xer, millennial? Like, you know exactly what age groups that refers to. Hands up, those that know. Okay, not that many. So, okay, we'll do a quick overview. The builder generation are those that are born before 1945. So those would be the people that would have lived through, they would have been probably young adults, a lot of them living through like the Great Depression. And so they were very shaped by that era. They are a very hard-working, dedicated, it's like the plow, you plow, you plow, you plow, you plow, you plow, you never give up. You plow, you plow, you plow, you plow. They are like the steady eddies of the body, faithful. The boomer generation born after the war, the Second World War, when there was a baby boom, 1945 to 1946, through around 1964. That is the basically largest generation, I think, right now. In North America, not globally, but in North America. And that group is, so right now, between the ages of about late 40s and into late 60s. That's a big generation. Most of you, how many of you here are boomers? Yikes. So 70% say of the room. Are there any builders? I didn't ask if there are any builders. Anybody born before 1945? No, so it's like I think we're probably mostly a boomer Gen X room here. The boomer generation is the influence generation right now. They're the ones who are, you guys as a generation, you were raised and were teenagers, a lot of you in the 60s and early 70s. You went through the whole 60, 70 revolution. You didn't run it, but you were shaped by it. Actually, like the Timothy Learys and all of these guys, they were actually builder generation, the ones who instigated it. But you guys as young people were deeply shaped by what happened in the 60s and the 70s, either in the Jesus movement. Any of you involved with the Jesus movement in the 70s? Yeah. Protested against it, okay. Wow, I didn't know people were protesting against the Jesus movement. That was the key shaping influence for the boomers. You're a very radicalized generation. And a generation that, from a very early age, got a message that together you could change things. You could influence things. You have a really strong sense of identity as a generation. And there's a confidence, I think, that's come from, that you have, a natural confidence you have because of that. Because you saw at a very young age, banding together and you guys doing something and having global influence. The Gen X generations, born 1965 to 1979. How many are Gen Xers here? Come on, put your hands up, be proud. Proud Gen Xers. And the The Gen X generation, I'll actually just give the age category. The last one's millennials. This is the last named generation, is millennials. That would be people born between 1980 and sort of 2000. Are there any millennials in the room? Got a few millennials here. Ooh, we got a few more millennials today. Yeah, so the millennial generation, they're also known as Gen Y or the Echo Boom. They are kids mostly of the boomers. And they are, so from a demographic perspective, the baby boom is a huge generation. When you look at a chart of demographics, you'll see this like 1945 big, like they start this big mountain starts afterwards. It sort of peaks around the mid-50s and then starts dropping. And then there's this big trough. I'm talking about the birth rate. This big trough in the birth rate, and then it starts rising again. The trough is Gen X. The rise again is the Echo Boom, or the millennials. So Gen X is just by pure numbers a much, much smaller generation than the boomers. As a result, and we come like right behind you, for most of you, we're not your kids. Some of you, yes, but for most of you, we're not your kids. As most of us have parents that are builders, like Dwayne was talking about today. His dad's in his 80s. His dad's a builder. So our generation, right from the beginning, because we were a smaller generation, and we never really had, at any point in our life, one of these like sort of aha moments like you guys had in the 60s and 70s, something that rallied us together as a generation, we don't have that same sense of cultural identity as a unit, as a group. In fact, it's interesting because I'll talk to a lot. I'll share like this and speak, and I'll say how many people are between this age group and this age group, and 65 and 79, and a lot of Gen Xers don't even know they're Gen X. Like they've never even heard that term. Because not only are we a smaller generation, but we tend to be quite isolated one from another and alienated. In fact, it's one of the things that defines us as a generation is a sense of alienation, a sense of not belonging. And we get this for various reasons. Some of the sociological reasons are because, as I said, we were a smaller generation. And it's like being a black person in a room full of white people. If you're the white guy, you don't even notice because you're the dominant culture, right? But if you're the black guy, the one black guy, like I had one black guy in my high school of 2,300 white people, he knew he was different than everybody else. It's the same thing with the boomers. The boomers are the dominant culture. You guys are the ones that you have the power, you have the money, media, etc. I'm serious. And because you're the bigger group and we're so much smaller, we were never really targeted or marketed even to. We weren't even, like the advertisers never even bothered with us. So you think, oh, what's the big deal of that? The deal about that is advertising reflects, like if they're trying to get you to buy their product, they're going to want to reflect you with their product, right? They're trying to build a connection, you and the product, if they're not even going to try to market to me, I'm never seeing myself reflected in media. I'm never seeing myself. And subtly, it creates a feeling like, am I invisible? Is there any place for me? Do I even exist? And this is not something we were consciously thinking, but it was shaping us. Another huge shaping influence for us as a generation was the fact that most of us got out of high school or out of university in the 90s when the massive recession hit, which at that time was the biggest recession since the 1930s. Okay, I came out of university at that point, and I can tell you I had to put out 100 resumes to get an interview, not a job. I remember my mom used to say, oh, when I got out of university, there were just jobs, jobs, jobs. Because she got out in the boom in the 50s and the 60s, right? For me, it was like 100 resumes to even get an interview, and then how many interviews before you could even get a job, if you could get a job in your field. This is the time, this time in the 90s is when they coined the term McJobs. You know what a McJob is? It's somebody with a master's degree living in their parents' basement working at McDonald's because that's the only work they can get. And because they couldn't get work, they couldn't get married. Because they couldn't get married, they couldn't have kids. And so you have this massive delay in the Gen X generation. Actually, the average age of marriage jumped forward significantly in our generation. Like in your guys' generation, people were getting married at like 19, 20, 21 even. For us, it's not even odd for somebody to be getting married in their mid-30s for the first time. They're 30, 35, they're having kids, 35, 40. Like, who'd ever thought? Like, people that had kids in their 40s, in your guys' generation, that was just an accident, right? But people are planning it that way now. They're like, I'm gonna have my career, then I'm gonna get married, then I'm gonna have my family. It's just like, but a lot of it was because we didn't really have a choice. And so again, it created within us this feeling like there's this thing of delay. Like, we're waiting to grow up. We're waiting to get to be the adults, like to get to have the life everybody else got, you know? And like, we did all the things our parents told us to do. We went to school, we got the university education, and now here I am, working at McDonald's, living in my parents' basement, right? We're the first generation to realize life wasn't gonna be better than it was for my parents. You see, every generation prior to that, there's this feeling of progress. We're progressing. Every generation has it better. My grandparents worked hard. They immigrated to this country, worked on a farm so that my dad would have it better. My parents worked hard so I would have it better. But like I said, our generation suddenly realized, whoa. As the economy started collapsing, as we started realizing that we're like, you know, all the things we know now about the economics and what they're saying about CPP and what they're saying about, you know, like, there's not going to be